What's up, guys? It's John. I'm making this video to talk about TechnoTutor and a little bit about why I'm doing TechnoTutor and why I was attracted to it in the first place. I wrote down a few things over here because just this helps me process all my points. And so why was I attracted to TechnoTutor in the first place? Like, what drew me in? At some point in, like, a couple years ago, I realized that my biggest issue that was holding me back was my inability to read, basically. Read effectively. It's not just like, I can pronounce the words, I can, get through the motions, but effectively reading, I realized, was not something that I was used to, where, I could burn through hundreds of pages in a week and retain a bunch of information. That's not how I consciously realized it at first. What I first saw was that I was having emotional reactions. Oh, I'm using my computer as a light here. What I first noticed was I was having emotional reactions to particular types of information, and therefore I wasn't able to read whatever the hell was in front of me. It could be a certain word, or it could be from a certain source. There was just certain things that would trigger me, and the way I put it is I was like being emotionally allergic to certain words. And I have a memory that comes up for me that kind of emphasizes the point. So we all took math, we all took the same things in school. And when I was young, like in elementary school, I remember that I would get math homework and I would come home with the math homework. And I'd be doing the math homework on my coffee table, and I would get really frustrated trying to solve the math problems that I was shown in school. And I would get to the verge of tears, and I'd be so frustrated and angry, like hunched over on this coffee table, trying to solve the math problems that they had shown me how to do in school. And I couldn't process it. Like my brain would be racked with the information, and I know that I understood it, or I knew that I could understand it. I knew that I could get it, but I didn't know why I wasn't getting it. And so I would be stressed out. I'd be pulling on my hair, like literally crying, and my mom would be there trying to help me understand the math problems and solve them and show me different ways to do them. But I had already supplanted the teacher as the point of authority for the information, and so I would dismiss and disregard my mom's input, and I'd be stuck in that emotional reaction to the information that I was looking at. I couldn't do the math because I was stuck in the emotional energy that I had in regards to the information. And then, so this memory is important because just imagine we all have that sort of experience. We all have that sort of memory with one thing or another. And you have years of that sort of experience accumulated in your body. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick. You have years of that sort of experience accumulated in your body as an adult, where you run into these mental blocks or these emotional reactions to information, and you're not able to process what's right in front of you because of that reaction, right? And so we call it a bunch of different things, like mental blocks or learning disabilities, but never really understanding why we don't get it, because at some point if you're like me, you know you can understand stuff. You know you can understand lots of stuff. You can learn anything. You know that part of yourself. You've been there, you've seen it, you've had aha moments. And so it's just frustrating to not know why certain things click and why other things don't. Well, at some point a couple years ago, I realized what it was for me. And it's that emotional reaction to the information. I'm not in the state of mind to be able to process what I'm looking at. I'm not clear, therefore it's not getting through, right? Because as long as there's that reaction, it's never going to get dialed in. And so then comes along TechnoTutor about like a year later, after I had figured out this problem where I couldn't process information because of emotional reactions that are sometimes specifically tied to certain words, right? That's very interesting. It's like certain words just will trigger you, and then all of a sudden you're not able to actually think clearly. And it's just because there's an attachment to a word, whether it's a memory or an energy, an emotional energy, which they're usually tied. So when TechnoTutor came along, I was already aware of this point, and I was practicing it when I was reading and when I was teaching myself things. And during that time, I had already seen quite a bit of acceleration in my ability to learn, because I had kind of cracked the code on what was holding me back. And so I was seeing a lot of progress in my life and a lot of development, and because my emotional stability was there, I was practicing solving that problem, which is always being emotionally unstable, having information that can trigger me, and therefore walking around with only an ounce of clarity when I know that there's so much more potential for me than just that little ounce of clarity. I knew I could walk around being absolutely clear no matter what I was looking at. So, I had developed routines and habits and points of support and stability to deal with that problem. Then I found TechnoTutor, and that was the definitive solution, because TechnoTutor directly addresses this problem and a number of other things, which it all comes down to our ability to read, because, well, reading is seeing. It's as simple as that. Like, you read your environment when you look at it. So no matter what you're doing, you're always reading. But it directly addresses that point with our words, and it's the tool to releasing those charges so that when you look at a word, you know what it means. Hold on one second. Hey, Justin. Can't think of specifics, but I've definitely maybe more task-oriented rather than information processing, but have been stuck in my own ideas of how things should be done, even when someone shows me an easier way. It's a habit that you have to break or set a new habit. I'm not quite sure I know what you mean there. I'll have to have you expand on that while I continue here. So, when you know what words mean, this is the point I'm getting to. When you know what words mean and you have the names for things, you have a point of clarity with what you're looking at, and you can call your attention to it. You can direct your focus. When you have emotional reactions to things, whatever it is, you're never going to be able to see clearly. And we all know that. You can't think clearly, like when you're hijacked by your emotions, whether it's anger or sadness, and that leads us to making poor judgment. So I keep hearing about TechnoTutor. Now this hindrance is gone, so my current word is subtext, for it's in everything we are exposed to. Since this is gone, it won't resurface to the same unbearability. Made up word. Current word is... I'm not quite sure I know what you mean, James. I know what the word subtext means, but I'm not sure exactly how this relates to the TechnoTutor point. So, for an adult, this is a longer process than if you were a child. The children don't have a bunch of these reactions dialed into them yet, and even if they do, it's easier for them to change. As an adult, we have a lot of those reactions built up over time. I have years of this experience that I had when I was in school, where someone is teaching me something and the information can't seem to get through. I can't seem to get it to click. And then that whole experience of learning being troublesome comes through again, where I don't like reading, because reading is boring. And I can't sit through something. I can't sit through a video, or I can't get through an article because the words aren't effectively being processed. It's not getting through. So with TechnoTutor, it's the solution, because it's a technology that automates the process of cleaning up your words so that you don't run into these emotional hiccups as you're reading, or as you're listening to somebody, or even as you're speaking. So coming back to my notes here real quick, because I had some interesting points in here. When you don't get it like you used to, and you don't know why you don't get it, you start throwing all sorts of fits. Eventually, you reject whatever information is in front of you so that you can't process, and maybe you also start dismissing anyone trying to help you understand it, just like I did with my mom. So, like when I was younger and I was trying to do those math problems, the point that I would get to in my frustration and in my anger is I would kind of like throw it all out. Like I would just be done with it. I don't want to deal with it. It's not working for me. So I'm just going to let that ride. I'm going to let that slide. And then my mom too, I would dismiss her because she wasn't the point of authority in my mind. And so I realized this point with anything, right? Like when you're trying to learn something new, or for me specifically, it's taking on new tasks, like big new endeavors. If I'm not good at it and I don't understand what I'm doing and what's in front of me, eventually I get to a point where I want to reject the information outright. I want to turn it into the enemy so that I can attack it and not have to deal with it. And then eventually throw out anybody that's trying to help me actually understand what it is that I'm doing. So the emotional reactions that we have to the information cause us to sort of like act out, right, in some sort of violent manner, whether it's against, the people around us or to ourselves. So that's all I got for now. See you guys.